The first light of morning spilled through the trees like liquid gold, soft and quiet, brushing against pine needles and damp moss. Officer Harper Lane adjusted the strap of her duty belt and stepped off the gravel lot onto the narrow forest trail. It was a path she knew by heart, every bend, every worn route, but today something felt different. The world didn't greet her the same way. It held its breath. Harper wasn't sure why she hesitated at the trailhead. She had done this patrol 100 times, this same route through the woods before the town stirred. It was supposed to be peaceful, predictable, her last shift before 2 weeks off. And yet, her boots paused mid-step. Something in her gut whispered, wait. The air was cool and damp, with the faint scent of pine and earth clinging to her breath. Morning fog curled low around her ankles, turning each tree into a silent sentry. Harper took a slow step forward, then another. Her heartbeat found rhythm with the quiet crunch of gravel beneath her boots. That's when she saw him. A small shape, barely more than a smudge against the fog. A German shepherd pup, charcoal black with patches of ash gray, ears too big for his head, legs just a little wobbly. He stood frozen on the path ahead no more than 20 feet away, his eyes dark, wet, wide, locked onto hers with a force that stopped her cold. There was something in that stare. Not just fear. It was need. It was knowing. Harper slowly crouched, lowering herself to the forest floor without a word. Her hand extended gently, not reaching, not grabbing, just resting open above the soil. She said nothing, just waited. The pup didn't flinch, didn't bark. His little body trembled with every breath, but his legs stayed rooted to the ground. She could tell he'd been alone a while. There was dirt tangled in his fur, small cuts on his front paws, and a kind of exhaustion in his eyes that no puppy should ever carry. But he hadn't collapsed. He hadn't given up. He was standing there, waiting for her. Harper's throat tightened. She softened her posture even more, bringing her other hand down to steady herself. Her voice was a whisper barely louder than the wind through leaves. "Hey there, little guy." No reaction, just a long stare, a beat of silence. Then Harper shifted slightly, easing one knee forward. The pup's ears twitched. He didn't bolt, he didn't run, but when she stood up slowly, carefully, and took a single step back, he followed. It wasn't curiosity, it wasn't confusion, it was intention. Each step she took, he mirrored. Not too close, not too far, just enough to keep her in sight. Harper stopped. So did he. She turned, he stayed put. Then she stepped again, and again. He followed, matching her pace like a tiny shadow pulled by gravity. Her breath caught, her instincts, honed by years of duty and danger, whispered louder than logic. This isn't random. This wasn't a pup who'd wandered from a backyard. This wasn't chance. He wasn't looking for help. He'd found it. And now he was trying to lead her somewhere. Harper glanced at the badge clipped to her vest as if grounding herself in something solid. Then she looked up again. Those eyes were still on her, wide, waiting. "Okay," she murmured, more to herself than to him. "Show me." And just like that, she stepped off the trail, following the silent whisper of a pup who had something to say without words. Harper stepped off the trail with a strange heaviness in her chest. It wasn't fear exactly, more like reverence, like crossing a boundary into something sacred. The earth under her boots shifted from packed gravel to soft soil. Ferns brushed her calves. Branches swayed gently above, filtering the morning light into flickering patches across the forest floor. The little pup didn't dart ahead. He moved with purpose, but slow, cautious, like he knew every inch of this place but still respected its silence. Every few steps he paused and looked back at her. Those eyes, dark and alert, checked in as if asking, "Are you still with me?" Harper nodded without speaking. She kept her distance, allowing the pup space, trusting whatever unseen thread connected them now. Each step took them deeper into the trees, where the air grew denser, cooler, and strangely quiet. The usual sounds of morning, chirping birds, rustling squirrels, wind against leaves, had faded to a hush. Only their movement remained, her steady footsteps, his soft paws, two hearts pressing forward into something neither fully understood yet couldn't turn away from. She didn't ask where they were going, she just followed. And with every turn, every small incline, she grew more certain. This wasn't random. This pup wasn't lost. He was leading her, somewhere that mattered. At one point, her foot snagged on a hidden root, throwing her balance off. She caught herself against a tree trunk, steadying her breath. The pup had stopped ahead, watching. His ears twitched, nose lifted. Then, when she stood upright again, he resumed walking, as if waiting for her had always been part of the plan. The forest around them grew denser, the underbrush thickened, old trees towered overhead, their bark blackened by time and weather. And then she saw it. A massive pine stump, jagged and splintered, rose ahead like a scar in the earth. It had clearly been struck by lightning. The bark was scorched and peeled back. Around it, the ground was disturbed, leaves scattered, soil clawed at. The pup stopped in front of it and turned to face her. Then he barked. Just once. It wasn't loud, but it cut through the silence like a blade. Sharp, commanding, urgent. Harper's pulse spiked. Her instinct screamed, "Something's here." She stepped around the stump, carefully pushing past a low-hanging branch. The moment she cleared the other side, her breath caught in her throat. Nestled in the hollowed-out base of a fallen tree, partially hidden by tangled roots and dirt, was a grown German shepherd. The dog's fur was darker than the pup's, but the same ash-gray pattern streaked its back. Her body was curled tightly, as if trying to disappear into the ground. One hind leg was twisted unnaturally, pinned beneath a collapsed root. Her sides rose and fell, shallow, weak. Harper dropped to her knees without thinking. The pup, his mission now complete, rushed forward and curled against the larger dog's neck, whimpering softly, licking at her muzzle. The adult dog didn't move, didn't respond. But Harper could see it now. Beneath the dirt and blood, there was life. Fragile, flickering, but present. Her hand hovered inches above the dog's side, unsure if touching would help or hurt. Her voice, when it came, was barely a whisper. "Oh God?" The pup looked back at her, his eyes glassy, his body trembling. There was no panic in him, not anymore, just urgency. Harper understood. This whole time, since that first moment on the trail, he hadn't been seeking safety for himself. He had come to get help. For her. For his mother. Tears stung her eyes, but she blinked them back. She reached for her radio, fingers fumbling. "Dispatch, this is Officer Lane," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "I need an emergency response team. I've got a downed canine, adult female. Critical condition. Juvenile with her, unharmed. We're approximately 1 mile northeast of the trailhead, near the old fire stump. I'll send coordinates." The static crackled, then a voice confirmed help was on the way. Harper lowered the radio, exhaling shakily. She looked back at the two figures in front of her. The pup had curled tighter against the older dog, his body pressed protectively over hers. She didn't move, didn't speak, just watched and listened. To the soft whimper of a son who refused to leave, to the barely there breaths of a mother who still fought to stay. This wasn't about a place on a map. This was about connection, silent and powerful, written not in language but in loyalty, in love. Harper pressed her hand gently to the pup's back, and for the first time he didn't flinch. He leaned into her, just slightly. Enough. The weight of the moment settled into her bones. She hadn't stumbled onto a rescue. She'd been summoned. Harper stayed crouched beside the fallen German shepherd, her breath shallow, her heart hammering like a fist against her ribs. The forest around them seemed to vanish. No trees, no mist, no birdsong. Just the fragile rise and fall of a broken body and the tiny pup who refused to leave her side. The adult dog's fur was matted with dried blood and clumps of dirt, her ribs visible through her side, one leg twisted grotesquely beneath her. She looked like she had folded in on herself, like her body was trying to disappear into the roots. Only one eye was barely open, clouded and distant, as if she wasn't really there anymore. And yet, she was. Somehow, still holding on. The pup had curled up beside her now, tucking his little body into the curve of hers like a puzzle piece that had always belonged. His head rested just beneath her chin, and every few seconds, he gave a soft whimper. Not loud, not desperate, just persistent, like a whisper that wouldn't go away. Harper had seen loss, too much of it. Car wrecks, overdoses, families torn apart in an instant. But this quiet, aching bond between two dogs alone in the woods undid her in ways she hadn't expected. The pup, Ash, she whispered to herself, already naming him, nuzzled his mother's neck, licking gently at the blood-caked fur. His little body trembled. His paws were muddy and scratched, probably from digging or trying to move roots too heavy for him. She didn't know how long they'd been out here, how many nights he'd stayed waiting, watching, alone. Harper swallowed the lump in her throat and leaned in. With hands that had cuffed criminals and carried stretchers, she reached out slowly, gently, and 2 fingers to the dog's chest. She held her breath, counting silently. 1, 2, there. Faint, thready, but real. A heartbeat. "Oh God," she exhaled. Her shoulders dropped, the air shaking from her lungs. She fumbled for her radio again. "Dispatch, this is Officer Lane. Update. The adult German Shepherd is alive. Critical condition. Repeat, alive. I've got vitals. Still requesting emergency extraction. ETA?" Static crackled. Then, 10 minutes. Stay put. Harper clipped the radio back and looked down. The pup hadn't moved, but now he was staring straight at her. Their eyes locked. In his, she saw something too old for his size. Something too heavy for a creature that small. She didn't speak, just nodded. "I see it. I see you." Then she reached out and placed her hands softly across his back. Ash stiffened for a second, then melted into her touch, like he had been holding his breath for hours, and finally exhaled. "You held on," she whispered. "You didn't leave her." Her voice cracked on the last word. Minutes passed, maybe more. The forest returned slowly. Rustling leaves, a breeze brushing her cheek, the distant hum of approaching help. But Harper didn't move. She stayed grounded beside them, her fingers still resting on the pup's back, the other hand gently brushing a few pine needles away from Nova's face. Ash shifted slightly, curling tighter, his tail wrapping around his mother's broken leg, as if trying to hold it in place. His body was pressed so firmly against hers it looked like he was trying to fuse them back together. Voices, the snap of branches, heavy boots. Harper stood, waving toward the break in the trees. "We're here," she called out. "Over here." 2 rescue officers and a field vet moved quickly, carefully navigating through the brush with gear in hand. Their faces changed the moment they saw the scene, first focused, then softened by understanding. "She's still alive?" one asked. Harper nodded. "Just barely." The vet knelt beside Nova, immediately assessing her injuries. "Pulse is weak but steady. We'll need to lift her carefully, stabilize the leg. Fluids now." One of the officers set up the stretcher, the other unzipped a pack of bandages and IV supplies. Harper backed away to give them room, but Ash didn't. The moment they tried to move Nova, he barked sharply, not aggressive, but terrified. He lunged forward, placing his body protectively over hers, a panicked growl rising from his tiny chest. His whole frame shook, but he stood firm. "Easy," Harper said gently, stepping in. She scooped him up before he could nip. He didn't fight. Not really, just squirmed enough to make his point. His eyes never left his mother. "She's going to be okay," Harper whispered, clutching him against her chest. "You brought us to her. You did it." Ash let out a sound that wasn't quite a cry, not quite a sigh, something in between, something ancient. Like every sleepless night, every chilled breath, every minute of waiting had been carried inside him and was now finally releasing. As the team lifted Nova onto the stretcher, Ash pressed his head beneath Harper's chin. His paws clung to her collar. He didn't cry out again. He just held on. They moved swiftly. Nova's body stabilized with braces and gauze, IV already flowing. Her breathing remained shallow but steady. Harper walked beside them, still holding Ash, her arms aching, but she didn't let go. The trek back to the clearing felt shorter than the journey in. Maybe because there was purpose now, direction, hope. At the rescue van, Nova was loaded in gently. Harper climbed in beside her, settling Ash in her lap. The pup leaned down and licked his mother's nose. Her ear twitched. It was small, barely there. But Harper saw it. Ash did too. He wagged his tail once weakly, but it was there, the beginnings of belief. That night, sitting in the back of a veterinary ambulance with a pup curled into her chest and a wounded mother dog fighting to breathe, Harper didn't feel like an officer on duty. She felt like something else, like someone who had been found. The veterinary rescue center was quiet, too quiet for Harper's nerves. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly above her, casting soft halos on the tiled floor. She sat in the corner of the waiting room, her back pressed against the cool wall, arms wrapped around the small, sleeping form of Ash. It had been 3 hours since they wheeled Nova into surgery. Ash hadn't moved from her lap. His breathing had slowed, but he wasn't fully asleep. Every now and then, his ears twitched. If a voice rose too loud behind the swinging door, his eyes would flick open, and his body would tense. Harper could feel every tremor through her jacket. They were both waiting, not for news, for permission to hope. The vet had said the chances were 50-50. The internal bleeding was worse than they thought. There were fractures, infection, trauma. But Nova was strong. Fighters come in all shapes, the vet had said. Harper looked down at Ash and thought, some come very, very small. The surgery ended after dark. Nova was moved into recovery, her body still hooked up to IVs and quiet machines. Harper had asked if she could sit nearby, not just for the pup's sake, for hers too. They gave her a blanket and a chair and said yes. For the next several days, the routine stayed the same. Ash would curl up at the edge of Nova's bed, never sleeping far from her side. He refused food until someone entered the room with fresh gauze or medication. Only when he saw Nova tended to, cleaned, monitored, cared for, would he sniff the bowl and nibble a bite. Harper kept coming back, even off duty, even exhausted, even when she should have been home catching up on sleep or answering unread texts from her sister. She returned to the recovery wing and sat with them. She wasn't sure when it shifted, when she stopped coming as a cop and started coming as something else. She just knew that when she saw Nova's eyes flutter open for the first time, it wasn't relief she felt, it was connection. The mother dog blinked slowly, adjusting to the low light. Her gaze landed on Ash first, always Ash. Then she looked at Harper and stayed there. Something in that look passed between them like a quiet current. There was no growl, no fear, no hesitation, just recognition. Harper lowered herself to the floor, arms resting on her knees. "Hey," she said softly. "You're safe now?" Nova blinked once, then closed her eyes again. Not from pain, from peace. That night, Harper stayed later than usual. The clinic had cleared out. Only the night nurse remained, and she brought in a second blanket without being asked. Ash had been unusually still that evening, curled tightly against his mom's belly, nose twitching, little paws tucked under his chest. Harper sat across from them, watching in the dim glow of the overhead light. Then, it happened. Ash stirred. He stood slowly, walked the short distance to Nova's head, and lowered his small snout to press it gently against her muzzle. He held it there, silent, still. Then he looked up at Harper. No bark, no whine, just that look. It said, "You see? She's coming back." "I told you." Harper's throat tightened. She leaned forward, one hand outstretched to rest against Nova's side. The rise and fall of her chest was slow but solid, her heartbeat steady. The swelling around her eyes had lessened, and her ears flicked at the sound of Harper's voice when she whispered, "Good girl." Ash returned to her side, sighing as he laid down, finally allowing himself to rest. That was when Harper knew. This wasn't a rescue mission anymore. It was a homecoming. She hadn't just helped two animals survive. She'd stepped into a family that refused to let go of each other, and had somehow made space for her too. The bond between Nova and Ash was unshakable. But what surprised Harper was how naturally that bond had extended to her. How Nova's eyes softened when Harper entered the room. How Ash started sleeping with his head against her boot instead of the floor. How all three of them moved in quiet rhythm without ever planning it. Love wasn't loud here. It was measured in glances, in shallow breaths, in shared silence. And Harper, who'd spent her life keeping people at arm's length, who'd built walls with badges and clipped answers, realized she was no longer outside those walls. She was inside. With them. With her family. And for the first time in a long, long time, she let herself feel it. The paperwork was simple. Just a few signatures and initials on standard adoption forms. But Harper's hands trembled slightly as she signed them. It wasn't nerves. It was the quiet gravity of what she was doing. She wasn't just taking two dogs home. She was bringing her heart back to life. The cabin had always been quiet, tucked away just outside of town, surrounded by tall pines and a wraparound porch that overlooked a yard she rarely stepped into. It had been her retreat from chaos, her place to breathe after long shifts, but lately it had started to feel more like a hiding place than a home. That changed the moment Nova stepped onto the porch, her injured leg gently bandaged, her steps slow but steady. Ash bounded ahead of her, darting from tree to tree like he was claiming territory for the first time. His energy was unmatched. Every leaf that fell was a new challenge, every squirrel a potential friend. Nova didn't chase. She lay under the big maple tree near the edge of the yard, her eyes always on Ash, always watching, always ready, just in case he needed her. Harper stood in the doorway that morning, coffee in hand, and watched the two of them move through her backyard like they had always belonged there. And maybe they had. Maybe the cabin hadn't been waiting for her peace. It had been waiting for theirs. The days grew cooler. Mornings came with mist. Leaves blanketed the yard in gold and amber. Harper fell into a rhythm she hadn't known she needed. She woke with the sun, brewed coffee while Ash stretched out by the fire, and Nova watched from her favorite rug by the window. There was something healing in the simplicity of it all. Nova's recovery was slow but steady. The limp remained, but so did her strength. She moved with quiet dignity, every step deliberate, every rest earned. Harper often sat beside her, one hand resting on her fur, the other cradling a warm mug, just listening to the wind in the trees. Ash, meanwhile, thrived. He grew bolder each day, chasing butterflies and barking at deer like he'd single-handedly protect them all. But no matter how far he wandered, he always circled back. To Nova. To Harper. To home. One night, a soft rain began to fall, just enough to tap on the windows and blur the edges of the world outside. The fireplace crackled gently. Harper sat on the floor, a blanket draped over her shoulders, legs stretched out on the rug. Nova lay curled beside her, breathing slow, steady. Ash had pressed himself between them, his head resting on Harper's leg, tail thumping faintly beneath the quilt. No words were spoken. None were needed. Harper reached out, her fingers brushing gently against Nova's side. Then she placed her palm on Ash's head. 3 beings, 1 heartbeat. That moment didn't come with fireworks or revelation. It came with stillness, with knowing. She hadn't chosen them, not really. They had found her. Ash, with his trembling steps in the forest. Nova, with her silent strength in the hollow of roots. They had led her, inch by inch, breath by breath, back to something she didn't know she'd lost. Back to herself. Outside, the rain fell steadily. Inside, the cabin glowed. A place that once echoed with loneliness now pulsed with warmth, with soft sighs, with the steady rhythm of paws against wood floor and hearts learning to trust again. And Harper Lane, officer, loner, survivor, sat in the middle of it all, finally understanding. Family doesn't need blood, or collars, or names. Sometimes it just takes one brave little soul to lead you through the dark and into love.